Did you know the greatest library in history didn't burn down in a single day, but died slowly from neglect? In 295 BCE, Ptolemy I built the Library of Alexandria as the world's first research university. Every ship entering the harbor was searched, and every book was copied by royal decree. 700,000 scrolls contained all human knowledge, from Archimedes' mechanical designs to complete histories of lost civilizations. But Roman conquest began the slow death. Greek scholars fled to other cities. Christian emperors cut funding for pagan research. The last mathematician, Hypatia, was murdered by mobs in 415 CE. When Arab conqueror Amr ibn al-As arrived in 642, he found only empty shelves. Humanity lost 1,000 years of medical knowledge in one forgotten building. Did you know medieval swords have been found across Europe that contain steel so pure it shouldn't have existed for another 800 years? The Ulfbert swords, discovered from Russia to Norway, were forged with crucible steel requiring temperatures of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This technology didn't exist in 9th century Europe. Over 170 of these blades bear the same inscription, plus VLF Bur plus T, but nobody knows who made them. Each sword was stronger than anything produced in their time, with perfect carbon content that matched Industrial Revolution standards. The steel composition reveals techniques only known in ancient Syria and India. Somehow, Vikings acquired impossibly advanced metallurgy through trade routes spanning entire continents. These mysterious blades prove our ancestors were far more connected than we ever imagined. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Sparta's brutal laws. First, they inspected every newborn baby and threw defective ones off Mount Taygetus to die. Second, boys were taken from families at age 7 and forced to survive by stealing food, but beaten if caught. Third, Spartan soldiers couldn't retreat in battle or return home. The phrase was "come back with your shield or on it." Fourth, all men had to marry by age 30 or face public shame and being banned from athletic competitions. Fifth, Spartans held annual Krypteia hunts, where young warriors secretly murdered helot slaves to prevent uprisings. State-sponsored assassination was their rite of passage. Did you know we found a Roman baker frozen in time at the exact moment he died? In 1862, archaeologists discovered Modestus's bakery in Pompeii, perfectly preserved for almost 2,000 years. His massive stone mills sat silent, once powered by donkeys grinding grain into flour. On August 24, 79 CE, he was preparing the morning bread when Mount Vesuvius erupted. The first pyroclastic surge hit at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Archaeologists found his skeleton collapsed next to the ovens, still wearing his leather apron. The superheated gas killed him instantly, but the volcanic ash preserved everything perfectly. Even the impression of his final breath remained in the hardened ash. 81 carbonized loaves were still sitting in his oven, bearing his baker's stamp. They became humanity's most perfectly preserved ancient meal, showing us exactly what Romans ate 2,000 years ago. One man's final morning became our window into daily life in the ancient world. Did you know 168 Spanish soldiers destroyed an empire of 12 million people in 30 minutes? In 1532, Francisco Pizarro faced impossible odds in the heart of Peru. His tiny band of conquistadors stood against 80,000 Inca warriors protecting their god-emperor Atahualpa. Pizarro sent a desperate invitation for a peaceful meeting in the town square of Cajamarca. It was a trap. Atahualpa arrived in a golden litter, confident these strange bearded men posed no threat. He brought no weapons, only ceremony. At Pizarro's signal, Spanish cavalry charged from hidden positions while cannons roared. In the chaos, thousands of unarmed Incas were slaughtered. Their emperor was captured alive. One act of treachery ended the largest empire in the Americas forever. Did you know the most powerful ruler in Europe died by drowning in 3 feet of water? Frederick Barbarossa was leading the Third Crusade with 100,000 German soldiers. This legendary warrior had survived 30 years of brutal medieval battles. On June 10, 1190, while crossing the shallow Salif River in Turkey, he simply fell off his horse. The mighty emperor drowned in a stream barely deeper than a bathtub. Within hours, his massive army completely disbanded and marched home. Richard the Lionheart and Philip Augustus lost their most crucial ally instantly. This freak accident in a tiny river saved Saladin's empire. One clumsy moment changed the entire balance between Christianity and Islam forever. What if the kamikaze typhoons never destroyed Kublai Khan's invasion fleets in 1274 and 1281? 140,000 Mongol and Korean troops were ready to conquer Japan after taking China and Korea. Without those divine winds, Japanese samurai culture would have been completely wiped out. The Mongols would have installed their administrative systems and Chinese cultural influences. Japan would never have developed its famous isolation policy or unique traditions. No isolation means no Meiji restoration and no rapid industrialization in the 1800s. Without an industrialized Japan, there would have been no attack on Pearl Harbor. World War II in the Pacific would never have happened. The entire course of modern Asian history would be unrecognizable. Two storms literally shaped the fate of the modern world. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the Oracle of Delphi. First, the oracle's divine prophecies came from getting high on ethylene gas seeping through cracks beneath Apollo's temple. Second, the Pythia had to be a virgin over 50 who spoke an incomprehensible babbling that priests translated into prophecies. Third, for 1,000 years, she controlled Greek politics with major wars starting or ending based on her pronouncements. Fourth, city-states paid massive bribes in gold and silver for favorable prophecies, making Delphi richer than most kingdoms. Fifth, her prophecies were deliberately vague, like telling Croesus he would destroy a great empire without mentioning it would be his own. This drug-addled elderly woman in a cave controlled the foreign policy of the entire Mediterranean world. Even Alexander the Great refused to campaign until she blessed his conquest. Did you know one man destroyed Japan's most powerful religious institution in just 10 days? For 400 years, Mount He's 3,000 warrior monks controlled Japanese politics through fear and religious authority. They held the emperor hostage with their sacred power, crushing anyone who opposed them. But in 1571, warlord Oda Nobunaga faced an impossible choice. He couldn't unify Japan while these armed fanatics blocked him from their mountain fortress. So he did the unthinkable, attacking Buddhism's holiest site. For 10 brutal days, his forces burned every building and killed everyone inside. Monks, women, children, no one was spared. This single act of violence shattered Buddha's political power forever. It opened Japan to Christian missionaries and changed the nation's path toward modernization. One decision, 10 days, 4 centuries of religious control destroyed. Did you know a pharaoh tried to erase 3,000 years of Egyptian religion overnight? In 1353 BCE, Egypt worshipped thousands of gods who controlled every aspect of daily life. Then Akhenaten became pharaoh and declared only one god would remain, Aten the sun disk. He ordered the destruction of ancient temples and banned the mighty Amun-Ra's name from being spoken. Priests lost their power instantly. Common people couldn't pray to their family gods anymore. The entire priesthood rebelled, sparking civil war across Egypt. After Akhenaten died, his son Tutankhamun restored the old gods immediately. They chiseled Akhenaten's name off every monument, erasing him from history. The world's first monotheist became a lost pharaoh for 3,000 years. What if Arminius never ambushed the Roman legions in the Teutoburg forest? In 9 CE, Varus led 20,000 Romans into Germania, straight into a trap that wiped out 3 entire legions. But imagine he never betrayed Rome. Without this crushing defeat, Rome would have pushed to the Elbe River, making all of Germany a Roman province. Germanic tribes would have been Romanized like the Gauls, speaking Latin and adopting Roman culture. No barbarian invasions would have collapsed the Western Empire centuries later. Rome might never have fallen. The Dark Ages could have been prevented entirely. European development would have followed a completely different path for the next 1,000 years. One betrayal changed everything. Did you know that Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor who crucified Jesus, ended his life as a disgraced exile in France? In 36 CE, Emperor Caligula banished Pilate to Vienne after he massacred Samaritan pilgrims. The irony is staggering. Caligula, history's most notorious madman, exiled Pilate for excessive brutality. Ancient historians Josephus and Philo documented Pilate's crimes, describing his venality, plundering, and habit of accepting bribes. The man who sentenced Christianity's founder spent his final years in shame in Gaul. Medieval legend claims he threw himself into Lake Geneva, which locals still call Pilatus. They say his ghost surfaces annually, seeking the forgiveness he never found. Did you know a single arrow changed the course of English history forever? King Harold Godwinson was England's ultimate warrior king in 1066. He had just crushed a massive Viking invasion at Stamford Bridge, destroying an army that came in 300 ships. But 3 weeks later, William of Normandy landed on England's south coast. Harold force-marched his exhausted troops 250 miles in just 4 days. On October 14th, the two armies clashed at Hastings in an 8-hour battle. Harold's shield wall held firm against wave after wave of Norman cavalry charges. Then at 4 p.m., a Norman archer's arrow pierced Harold's right eye, killing him instantly. The English army saw their king's dragon banner fall and broke into chaos. That single arrow eliminated the last Anglo-Saxon king forever. Norman rule began, reshaping English language, law, and culture for centuries. One arrow, one moment, one New England. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Emperor Commodus. First, he fought as a gladiator in the Colosseum 735 times and never lost once. But here's the twisted part. His opponents were given wooden swords while he used real steel weapons. Second, he literally renamed Rome after himself, calling it Commodiana. He even changed all 12 months to his own names and titles. Third, he charged the Roman treasury 1 million sesterces for each gladiator performance. His hobby single-handedly bankrupted the entire empire. Fourth, he once decapitated 100 ostriches in the arena using specially designed arrows. He forced terrified senators to sit and cheer for this massacre. Fifth, this 6'8" muscular emperor was so obsessed with being Hercules, he commissioned hundreds of statues of himself wearing lion skin. He actually carried a club to official state meetings. What if Robespierre had survived the Thermidorian reaction and continued his radical purges? On July 28, 1794, Maximilien Robespierre was planning to execute even more moderate revolutionaries when he was overthrown. But imagine he had succeeded instead. His festival of the Supreme Being would have replaced Christianity entirely, making deism France's official religion. Private property would have been eliminated through total wealth redistribution and systematic confiscation. The terror would have intensified beyond imagination. This extreme radicalization would have triggered a massive European coalition war 20 years before Napoleon. Every monarchy would have united against revolutionary France immediately. Napoleon might never have risen to power at all. The spread of nationalism across Europe would have been completely different. One man's survival could have rewritten the entire 19th century. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Magellan's voyage around the world. First, Ferdinand Magellan never actually completed the journey that made him famous. He died in the Philippines, and only 18 of his original 270 men survived the full trip. Second, his crew tried to mutiny and abandon him in Patagonia because the voyage took much longer than he had promised them. Third, they discovered the Strait of Magellan completely by accident while seeking shelter from a massive storm. Fourth, Magellan was killed by Chief Lapu-Lapu's warriors in 1521 while trying to force Philippine tribes to convert to Christianity. Fifth, the survivors had to burn one of their ships and eat leather boiled in urine to survive crossing the Pacific. When they finally returned to Spain in 1522, they had lost a full calendar day from traveling westward, proving Earth's rotation in the most practical way possible. Did you know a wedding feast once became the deadliest dinner party in Renaissance history? Lucretia Borgia, daughter of Pope Alexander VI, had a reputation for strategic marriages and mysterious deaths. In 1502, she married Alfonso d'Este in Ferrara, with 500 noble guests attending the lavish celebration. Within days, something went terribly wrong. Guests began collapsing with identical symptoms, violent stomach pains, and black vomit. 7 prominent nobles died within a week, all pointing to the infamous Borgia poison. Arsenic mixed with antimony, their signature weapon. But this wasn't random murder, it was calculated political elimination. Every victim was a rival to her new husband's power. One wedding feast had just consolidated Borgia control across 3 Italian states through strategic assassination. The most deadly wedding gift in history. Did you know that killing Rasputin required enough methods to eliminate an entire army? On December 30th, 1916, Russian nobles decided the mad monk had to die. Prince Yusupov fed him cyanide that could kill 5 men. Rasputin just kept eating cakes and drinking wine like nothing happened. So they shot him in the chest. He collapsed, seemingly dead. But when they returned, he grabbed Yusupov by the throat and chased him upstairs. They beat him with clubs and threw him into the frozen Neva River. The autopsy revealed water in his lungs. He was still alive when he hit the water. This impossible survival convinced many Russians that Rasputin truly had divine protection. His mystique outlasted the entire Romanov dynasty. Did you know a Roman senator was beaten to death with clubs for trying to help poor farmers? In 121 BCE, Gaius Gracchus stood before thousands of desperate citizens in Rome's Forum. His brother Tiberius had been murdered 10 years earlier for the same cause, land redistribution to the poor. Gaius knew the risks, but hunger drove him forward. The wealthy senators watched in terror as crowds cheered his every word. When Consul Opimius declared martial law, senators grabbed clubs and stones. 3,000 supporters were slaughtered in the streets. Gaius was cornered on Aventine Hill and beaten to death. This single act of violence ended peaceful reform forever. Murder became Rome's answer to politics. The path to Caesar's dictatorship had begun. Did you know a single vision in the sky changed the entire course of world history? On October 28, 312 CE, Emperor Constantine faced his greatest challenge. His rival Maxentius controlled Rome with 100,000 soldiers ready to fight. Constantine was outnumbered, desperate, fighting on enemy territory. Then he claimed to see something impossible, a flaming cross in the sky with the words, "In this sign, conquer." He made a shocking decision, ordering Christian symbols painted on every shield in his pagan army. The brutal battle lasted 6 hours at Milvian Bridge. Maxentius's troops were driven into the Tiber River. The rival emperor drowned in full armor when his escape bridge collapsed. That single vision made Christianity the religion of Rome. One moment changed everything. Did you know the Aztecs built a city of 200,000 people on water that was more advanced than anything in Europe? Tenochtitlan was constructed entirely on an artificial island in the middle of Lake Texcoco using floating gardens called chinampas. They wove reeds into massive rafts, covered them with mud, and anchored them with willow trees whose roots eventually reached the lake bottom. Over 20,000 of these floating farms produced enough food to feed the entire city. Their yields were 7 times higher than European farming. 50 miles of canals allowed canoe traffic throughout the entire city like ancient highways. When Spanish conquistadors first saw this floating metropolis in 1519, they thought they were witnessing a mirage. The engineering was so sophisticated, it seemed impossible. Did you know a murderous usurper shocked the ancient world with an act of unexpected honor? In 69 CE, Marcus Otho orchestrated Emperor Galba's brutal assassination to seize the Roman throne. But his triumph was short-lived. Vitellius was marching on Rome with 8 full legions, while Otho commanded only the Praetorian Guard. After winning a single battle at Locus Castorum, hope flickered briefly. Then reality struck. Continuing this civil war would devastate Rome and kill thousands of innocent Romans. After just 69 days as emperor, Otho made an impossible choice. He wrote final letters to his nephew, then drove a dagger into his chest. The man who murdered for power chose death over destroying his empire. Even his enemies wept at his funeral. Did you know the only woman to become emperor of China literally tortured her way to the throne? Wu Zetian started as a low-ranking concubine in 684 CE, but she had bigger plans. She built a secret network of 30,000 spies to watch everyone. Anyone who threatened her faced her twisted punishments. She chopped off limbs and threw victims into sewage pits to die slowly. Even her own family wasn't safe. She cut off her son's wife's hands and feet, then drowned her in a wine vat. Over 1,000 royal family members were executed. Her cruelty was so complete that she ruled unchallenged for 15 years. Fear made her the most powerful person on earth. Did you know the only woman to become emperor of China literally tortured her way to the throne? Wu Zetian started as a low-ranking concubine in 684 CE, but she had bigger plans. She built a secret network of 30,000 spies to watch everyone. Anyone who threatened her faced her twisted punishments. She chopped off limbs and threw victims into sewage pits to die slowly. Even her own family wasn't safe. She cut off her son's wife's hands and feet, then drowned her in a wine vat. Over 1,000 royal family members were executed. Her cruelty was so complete that she ruled unchallenged for 15 years. Fear made her the most powerful person on earth. What if Julius Caesar had listened to the soothsayer's warning and avoided the Senate on March 15, 44 BCE? 60 conspirators waited in the shadows, planning to kill him to save the Republic. But Caesar stays home. The assassination never happens. Within months, he launches his planned Parthian campaign with 16 legions. The greatest military mind in history conquers the entire Middle East, potentially reaching India. Without his martyrdom, Caesar formally abolishes the Republic and declares himself king, something Romans had forbidden for 500 years. He crushes Mark Antony and Cleopatra, prevents Augustus from rising to power. A living Caesar creates a military monarchy that lasts another 1,000 years. Western civilization develops completely differently. One warning changed everything. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Richard III's shocking discovery. First, his skeleton was found under a Leicester parking lot in 2012, 527 years after his death at Bosworth Field. Second, his spine was severely curved from scoliosis, making him genuinely hunchbacked, just like Shakespeare claimed. Third, forensic analysis revealed he suffered 11 wounds, including 2 fatal blows to his skull from a halberd and sword. Fourth, DNA testing proved his identity by matching his genetic code to a Canadian carpenter who was his 17th great-nephew. Fifth, his hands were bound behind his back when buried, indicating he was captured and executed rather than killed in battle. But here's the mind-blowing part. Locals built a Victorian toilet directly over the exact spot where the last Plantagenet king lay buried. Did you know the word assassin comes from a medieval sect that literally drugged recruits into believing they'd seen paradise? In 1090, the Hashashin established their fortress at Alamut in Persia. They would give young men hashish, then show them a fake paradise filled with beautiful women. The recruits believed they had glimpsed heaven itself. These devoted killers learned multiple languages and spent years disguised as merchants or scholars. They infiltrated enemy courts, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. Their most famous victim was Nizam al-Mulk, the most powerful vizier in the Islamic world. One assassin killed him with a single dagger thrust while he traveled. Fewer than 1,000 members terrorized the entire Middle East for 200 years, until the Mongols finally destroyed their mountain stronghold. Religious devotion turned into the world's first organized assassination network. What if Mahmud of Ghazni had decided to permanently conquer India instead of just raiding it 17 times? Between 1000 and 1027, his raids brought back 20 tons of gold from Somnath Temple alone, making him the richest ruler alive. But imagine if he stayed and established permanent Islamic rule. The Delhi Sultanate would have begun 150 years earlier, completely changing Indian history. Hindu temple culture would have been wiped out entirely, not just damaged. Indian mathematics and astronomy would have reached Europe centuries sooner through Islamic scholars. But here's the most shocking possibility. Early control of India's massive wealth and trade routes could have made the Islamic world so powerful that the Mongol invasions never would have succeeded. One decision could have prevented the destruction of Baghdad and changed medieval Europe forever. Did you know a single emperor's decision triggered a religious civil war that lasted over a century? In 726, the Byzantine Empire worshipped religious icons like magical protectors. People believed these sacred images could heal the sick and defend cities from invasion. Then Emperor Leo III witnessed a massive volcanic eruption. He declared it was God's punishment for idol worship and ordered every icon destroyed. Soldiers smashed 1,000-year-old mosaics, while crowds of women fought them in the streets. Families were torn apart as fathers obeyed imperial orders and mothers protected sacred images. When troops destroyed the Golden Christ icon above the palace gate, riots erupted. Hundreds died in the violence that followed. This religious purge eliminated most Byzantine art forever and split Christianity permanently. One man's interpretation of a natural disaster changed religious history. Did you know farmers accidentally discovered an army that had been waiting underground for over 2,000 years? In 1974, Chinese farmers were digging a well when their shovels broke through something unexpected. Below them lay rows of life-sized clay soldiers, each with a unique face. This was the legendary terracotta army of Emperor Qin Shi Huang. The first emperor who united China through brutal conquest was obsessed with immortality. After surviving multiple assassination attempts, he feared death above all else, so he ordered 700,000 workers to spend 36 years creating 8,000 clay guardians. Many workers were buried alive to protect the tomb's secrets. Each warrior was modeled after real soldiers, complete with weapons and horses. This single discovery rewrote everything we knew about ancient Chinese military technology. the emperor's underground army had been faithfully standing guard for over 2 millennia, waiting to protect their master in the afterlife. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the Battle of Thermopylae. First, the famous 300 Spartans weren't alone at all. 7,000 other Greek allies fought alongside them, but popular culture completely erased them from history. Second, King Leonidas chose to stay and die because of a terrifying prophecy. Either Sparta would fall, or a Spartan king must perish. Third, the Persians were so frustrated by Greek resistance that Xerxes ordered his men to whip the sea 300 times. They even branded it with hot irons for destroying his bridges. Fourth, the immortal Persian guard weren't actually immortal. They just immediately replaced fallen soldiers to keep exactly 10,000 men. Fifth, Ephialtes, who betrayed the Greeks, was a deformed Spartan rejected from the 300. This 3-day battle delayed Persia long enough for Athens to evacuate and win at Salamis, changing Western civilization forever. Did you know Queen Elizabeth once knighted a pirate who nearly started a world war? Francis Drake began as a slave trader who developed a burning hatred for Spain after they betrayed him in Mexico. In 1577, Elizabeth secretly ordered him to raid Spanish colonies in the Pacific, where no English ship had ever sailed. His crew thought they were explorers until Drake started attacking Spanish treasure ships. They captured so much gold and silver that the Golden Hind nearly sank from the weight. Drake returned with 26 tons of silver worth £1.5 million, more money than England's entire royal treasury. Elizabeth faced a choice: return the treasure to avoid war with Spain, or keep it. She knighted Drake on his own ship and used his stolen wealth to build the fleet that defeated the Spanish Armada. Sometimes piracy pays. Did you know the most powerful army on Earth vanished overnight without a single battle? In 701 BCE, Assyrian king Sennacherib ruled the known world, having crushed 46 cities and enslaved entire nations. Now he turned his sights on Jerusalem with 185,000 soldiers surrounding the walls. King Hezekiah prayed desperately as the siege machines rolled forward and surrender seemed certain. Sennacherib sent his final ultimatum: "Your God cannot save you." But when dawn broke, every single Assyrian soldier lay dead in their tents. No wounds, no signs of battle, just silence. The terrified king fled back to Nineveh in complete humiliation. One mysterious night saved an entire kingdom and changed history forever. Did you know history's greatest mathematician was killed while solving math problems in the dirt? In 212 BCE, Roman forces finally breached the walls of Syracuse after a brutal siege. General Marcellus had given strict orders to capture Archimedes alive, knowing his brilliant war machines had held off their army for years. But when a Roman soldier found the 75-year-old genius, he was completely absorbed in geometric calculations drawn in the sand. According to Plutarch, Archimedes was so focused on his work that he hadn't even noticed his city had fallen. As the soldier's sword came down, his final words were reportedly, "Do not disturb my circles." One moment of academic obsession cost humanity its greatest ancient mind. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Queen Zenobia of Palmyra. First, she declared herself equal to Cleopatra and claimed descent from the Queen of Sheba while conquering most of the Eastern Roman Empire. Second, she rode into battle wearing full armor, commanding armies that stretched from Turkey to Egypt. Third, she spoke 8 languages fluently and hosted philosophical debates with the greatest scholars of her time. Fourth, she minted coins with her own image and called herself Augusta, a title reserved only for Roman empresses. Fifth, when Emperor Aurelian defeated her in 272, he paraded her through Rome in golden chains so heavy she needed servants to walk, but gave her a palace for life. For 800 years, Rome stood unconquered, the eternal city, protected by walls no foreign enemy had ever breached, until Alaric arrived with his Visigoth army in 407. He didn't attack the walls, he surrounded the city and waited. For 3 years, nothing entered Rome. No food, no supplies, nothing. Romans began eating grass, then leather, then each other. Pope Innocent desperately tried negotiating while patrician families sold jewelry for moldy bread. Finally, starving Roman slaves opened the Salarian Gate themselves. Alaric's forces poured in, looting the imperial palace and stripping gold from Christian churches. They kidnapped the emperor's sister and sacked the city for 3 days. Rome, the invincible empire, had fallen to starvation. The myth was shattered forever. What if the devastating plague never struck Athens in 430 BCE during the Peloponnesian War? In reality, this plague killed 1/3 of Athens' population, including their brilliant leader Pericles. It destroyed Athenian morale and shattered their democratic vision. But without the plague weakening them, Athens would have maintained complete naval supremacy. Their democratic coalition would have crushed Sparta decisively. Athenian democracy would have spread across the entire Greek world instead of collapsing. This would have prevented the rise of Macedonian monarchy under Philip II. No weakened Greece means no conquest by Alexander's father. No Hellenistic empire. No Alexander the Great. Western philosophy, science, and political systems would have developed completely differently. One plague changed the entire course of civilization. Did you know a 14-year-old boy nearly destroyed the Roman Empire by wearing dresses and marrying men? In 218 CE, Elagabalus became Emperor of Rome, the world's most powerful military empire. But this Syrian teenager shocked everyone by appearing in silk gowns, makeup, and declaring himself a woman. He appointed his male lover as Caesar and demanded senators call him Lady in official documents. The Praetorian Guard watched in horror as he performed as a prostitute and saw ancient gender reassignment surgery. His own grandmother had seen enough. She orchestrated his brutal assassination in a palace latrine. At 18, his 4-year reign of sexual rebellion was over. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the Xiongnu Empire. First, this nomadic confederation controlled over 2 million square miles and forced mighty Han China to pay massive tribute for over 200 years. They were more powerful than Rome at its peak. Second, their leader Modu killed his own father by training his army to shoot arrows at whatever he aimed at first. Then he aimed at his father during battle. Third, Xiongnu warriors could accurately shoot arrows while riding at full gallop using revolutionary composite bows. Europe wouldn't match this technology for centuries. Fourth, they controlled the entire Silk Road, taxing every caravan and becoming incredibly wealthy from east-west trade. Fifth, when they collapsed in 48 CE, many tribes migrated west and became the Huns under Attila. The same people who defeated China later destroyed Rome. Did you know an emperor built a palace so massive it sparked a revolution? In 64 CE, fire consumed 2/3 of Rome, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. While citizens lived in ash and rubble, Emperor Nero saw opportunity. He seized 300 acres of prime real estate in the heart of the city. Not for housing the displaced, but for his personal pleasure palace. The Domus Aurea had 300 rooms, ivory ceilings that dropped flower petals, and rotating dining halls. He erected a 120-foot bronze statue of himself in the courtyard. Romans slept in temporary shelters, while Nero built artificial lakes and underground tunnels. The finished palace covered more land than Vatican City, right in central Rome. Citizens watched their emperor feast in golden halls while they starved. This single act of greed triggered the rebellion that ended his reign. Later, emperors had to tear it down and build public works to regain trust. One palace destroyed an empire. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the Ottoman Empire's most terrifying military force. First, the elite Janissaries were created by kidnapping Christian boys aged 8 to 15 from their families through a system called devshirme. Second, these child slaves were forbidden from marrying and forced to consider the Sultan their only family, completely severing ties to their past. Third, they became so powerful they regularly assassinated sultans who displeased them, controlling Ottoman politics for over 300 years. Fourth, despite being slaves, they received the empire's best education, and many became grand viziers, developing their own unique culture, mixing Islam with their Christian backgrounds. Fifth, when Sultan Mahmud II finally disbanded them in 1826, he had to massacre 4,000 Janissaries in their barracks because they had become too powerful to defeat any other way, ending 500 years of child soldier recruitment. Did you know one of the 7 wonders of the world was built because a king couldn't bear to see his wife cry? In 605 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar II ruled the most powerful empire on earth. He had conquered Jerusalem and controlled the entire Middle East, but his marriage to Princess Amytis of Media was purely political, securing his northern borders. The problem was, she was desperately homesick for the green mountains of her homeland. Day after day, this warrior king watched his queen wither away in Babylon's dusty plains. So he did something unprecedented. He built her an artificial mountain paradise, 400 feet tall with revolutionary irrigation systems pumping water from the Euphrates River. The legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon were born from love, but bankrupted the empire and contributed to its eventual fall to Persia. Did you know a librarian in ancient Egypt calculated Earth's circumference with 99% accuracy using only shadows and geometry? In 240 BCE, Eratosthenes noticed something incredible. At noon on summer solstice, the sun cast no shadow in the city of Siena. But 500 miles north in Alexandria, it created a 7-degree shadow. He realized this meant Earth was curved, not flat. Using basic math, he calculated the angle represented 1/50th of a full circle. He multiplied 500 miles by 50 and got 25,000 miles around. The actual measurement is 24,101 miles. This wouldn't be proven again until ships sailed around the world 1,700 years later. One brilliant observation changed everything we knew about our planet. What if Cyrus the Great's revolutionary policies from 539 BCE had spread across the entire ancient world? When Cyrus conquered Babylon, he did something unprecedented. He freed all slaves, allowed exiled peoples to return home, and declared religious freedom for everyone. But imagine if Greece and Rome had adopted these same principles. No slave-based economies driving endless conquest, no persecution of early Christians, no ethnic cleansing campaigns. Ancient empires might have focused on trade instead of war, developing completely different economic systems. Most mind-blowing of all, universal religious tolerance could have prevented the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, and centuries of religious wars. One cylinder's message could have fundamentally altered Western civilization. What if the Ottoman fleet had crushed the Holy League at Lepanto in 1571? 280 Ottoman galleys faced the largest Christian naval force in history. But imagine they won decisively instead of suffering defeat. Without this crushing loss, Admiral Ali Pasha would have captured Venice within months. Ottoman forces would have swept into Italy, possibly reaching Rome itself. The Mediterranean would have become an Islamic lake, cutting European trade routes to Asia. No Asian spices, no wealth flowing into European coffers. The Renaissance would have withered without this crucial funding. But here's the mind-blowing part. Ottoman control of Italian ports would have made Columbus's voyage impossible. No European discovery of the Americas. The New World would have developed independently for centuries longer. One naval battle could have changed everything. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Albrecht von Wallenstein. First, this man owned 25% of an entire country during the 30 Years' War. A minor nobleman who became so wealthy he controlled a quarter of Bohemia. Second, he turned war into his personal business by lending money to the Holy Roman Emperor. Instead of cash repayment, he demanded land, making himself a multimillionaire. Third, his private army of 100,000 mercenaries was larger than most royal forces. He paid every soldier from his own fortune. Fourth, his Prague palace had 1,000 rooms and 7 chambers visitors had to pass through. Fifth, Emperor Ferdinand became so terrified of his power that he ordered Wallenstein's assassination in 1634. His own officers murdered him in his bedroom.